Hi, I'm Ryan Tomlinson, and today I'm going to talk about how we've been able to improve our ability to build and deliver software at speed at GSK. So I'll talk a little bit about why this is such a challenge, in particular for large enterprises, but then I want to spend most of the time talking about how we've been able to enable our teams to build and deliver software in under 60 minutes from inception through to production in front of customers. And then I'll finish with some learnings based on that journey. So a study by the Standish Group found that 64% of all software features that we build are either rarely used or never used. Now, not only is that incredibly demotivating to think that most of what we build is waste, it's also extremely expensive, as you can imagine. So in the US alone, $250 billion a year is spent on building software. And perhaps even worse than that is the thought that we're not building for customers' needs. We're not building to solve their needs. And if that wasn't bad enough, for most organizations, it's also taking us months or years to find out whether what we're building is waste or not. And that could be, we could find that out much earlier. The report also found that one of the main reasons that these projects fail is a lack of user involvement. So again, we're either solving based on perceived needs or on internal stakeholder needs, but we're not doing a great job at solving for the customer. And the report found that those organizations that were more likely to be successful in building and delivering software features were those that were able to work in small increments and deliver value early and often. And really, this is the essence of Agile, as I'm sure everybody knows. But I think we often think of Agile as a way to deliver more and more often, and instead we should probably reframe it to our ability to learn at speed. And this is the concept of essentially feedback loops. And so feedback loops, there's two parts to this really, the way that I like to think of it. There's sensing and there's responding. So sensing is about using data, doing things like user research or looking at quantitative data to come up with ideas, build experiments, and get it in front of customers. And then once we're able to do that, we then look at the data as a result of that. So it's about this continuous learning and the ability to adapt. Now, the quicker that we can get around this loop, the quicker that we can learn. So it's about having a culture of experimentation. So in order to have an experimentation culture, we need to have a platform that we can really move at speed on. And that's what I want to talk about mostly today. So if you think of coming up with ideas and getting it in front of a customer, there's typically a set of processes that we have to go through. And in order to get around that feedback loop quickly, those processes need to be streamlined. And we need to have as minimal teams involved in that flow of value to ensure that we're being efficient. Now, when my team joined GSK, we knew that we needed to work in this way of fast feedback loops if we were going to deliver value for our customers. So we started to explore, what does it actually look like today? If we had an idea to get it in front of a customer, what does that actually look like? And this is the value stream map that we came up with. Now, I don't expect you to read each of these boxes, and nor am I going to go through all of them. But just to show you that there were 16 teams that we had to hand off to get something in front of a customer. Now, the first 9 boxes here, for example, the yellow boxes, are all creation of infrastructure. So we knew that the creation of infrastructure was going to take a significant amount of time with 9 handoffs between teams. And that just wasn't going to work for us. It wasn't conducive to iterating at speed. And because none of this was measured, we had some kind of third-party information that for one team it actually took them 250 days to get an idea, a simple idea, into production. So again, this just wasn't going to work for us. And what I haven't overlaid here is the additional processes internally to build products. So things like budgeting and getting budget approval, things like big room planning, all the processes that I'm sure yourself and your teams are well aware of. And again, these just serve to slow us down, and I haven't described that here. But not all process is bad. Of course, there's good process and there's bad process, and it's about understanding what process is good and what is bad. And I often talk of bad processes, process debt. It's things that accumulate over time that we end up complying with, rather than understanding the value that they add. And so particularly with larger organizations, we can tend to grow process over time. And the result of that I'm showing in the orange line in this graph is that our ability to move at speed decreases. And so a good example here is in a previous organization I worked at, there was a huge outage and it cost the company millions of dollars. And a senior executive decided that actually we need to stop this, and one way to do that would be to make sure that all changes had to go through a director approval. So he had the right intention. He wanted to reduce the number of customer impacting issues, but the result of this adding of process only served to slow us down, and it actually had no improvement in terms of quality or number of impacting issues. But this isn't the case for all large organizations. There are large organizations who can remain nimble and have a culture of experimentation and moving at speed. And Amazon is one that I'm sure we're all aware of particular note here. And there's a great quote by Jeff Bezos, and he says that good process serves you so you can serve the customer. But if you're not watchful, the process becomes the thing. And he then goes on to say, you stop looking at outcomes, you just make sure you're doing the process right. It's always worth asking, do we own the process or does the process own us? So it's really important that if we're going to build an environment and a culture of continuous experimentation, we have to make sure that we understand the value stream and that we own the process rather than just complying to the process. So when we joined GSK as a team, this is essentially where we found ourselves. And if we were going to be part of this transformation to build products at speed and add value for our customers, we were going to have to change some of these internal processes. So we got together as a team and we thought, where should we start? Where do we start making these changes? And after we mapped this out, we realized that actually the creation of infrastructure was probably a good starting point because of all the manual handoffs in the value stream. So we got together as a team and we created a vision. And this vision we called our 0 to 60 vision. And it was to enable our teams to provision infrastructure, self-serve, and get a product idea or an experiment into production in under 60 minutes with a high compliance and security posture. So this is what we did. We spent the last year working on this. How do we get to the point where we can build digital products at speed? So yeah, as you can imagine, there's a lot that underpins this. And in this short talk, I'm going to talk at a very high level, but I want to talk about the three things that we did and our approach to trying to achieve this vision. So the first, as you can probably imagine, is we invested heavily in the cloud, and in particular we chose a Google Cloud Platform. And then secondly, we relied heavily on infrastructure as code. So the ability to codify and automate our infrastructure enabled us to reduce the number of handoffs in the value stream. We were able to automate the creation of infrastructure. So there's a lot of work that underpins this, but I want to just give you a very high level in terms of where we ended up. And if you put yourself in the shoes of an engineer within our team, what do they actually have to do to now build infrastructure and get an application into production? So we built what we've called a project factory, which is essentially a generator for infrastructure. So if an engineer has an idea or a team has an idea and they want to build some infrastructure, they clone this project factory repository, and it's built using Terraform. They then add some standard fields, so things like their team name, their cost center, billing information, the types of environments that they want. So if they want, development, staging, production, etc. And then they create a pull request. That pull request is automatically validated, so a bunch of automated checks are done. And then the infrastructure team will peer review. So this is in about 12 to 15 minutes. And so there's just a single handoff. At that point, all being well, the GCP project is built in Google Cloud, and all their environments are automatically built using infrastructure as code as it runs through this CI/CD pipeline. Now, the result of that is that the team then have a full environment in Google Cloud. They don't actually have permissions to log in to Google Cloud, but they have least privilege permissions. So any changes that they want to make have to go through infrastructure as code. They get audit logging and shipping, DNS, firewalls, billing and cost attribution, everything required to actually build products. And again, this is in under about 20-25 minutes. The final steps is that it uses the GitHub API, it creates a repository for them, and it moves their infrastructure as code into that repository. And then finally, it builds a CI/CD pipeline for them. So very high level run through of where we landed, but in under about 30 minutes, the team is now able to build out an entire infrastructure with a CI/CD pipeline. So this is what I showed you before, 16 teams, incredibly long time to actually build something. And this is where we got to after this work. So now 4 teams in that value stream. And again, at this stage, we were only about under 3 weeks to build something and getting into production. And again, it wasn't good enough. It was a great step, but it wasn't good enough. So the next step was really, we looked at what else is in this value stream that requires handoffs that could potentially be automated. So if you look here, we are, after writing the code, we are doing things like having manual testers and then passing it off to do security testing by the security ops team and then compliance testing by the tech security and risk teams. Now, we knew those things could be completely automated. But again, this wasn't about saying that QA is important or security and compliance aren't important. They're massively important to us, particularly as a healthcare company. But it was about where can we free up time from passing it to other teams where it could be automatable. And then that frees those teams up to do more exploratory, value-added work. We can actually improve our security and compliance posture by doing this. And this taking of things downstream and moving them to the remit further up the value chain is the concept of shifting left, or the shift left principle. And that's really where we got our next big wins, our ability to increase these feedback loops and reduce our time to production. So this concept of shifting left actually comes from manufacturing, and its roots are in the Toyota production system. So if you think of a manufacturing line, this lady, for example, here, her job isn't to put the parts together and then hand it off to the next station who does quality inspection. Her responsibility is to build quality in. And this is what we were trying to do with this shift left principle. Because engineers should care about testing, they should care about security and compliance. So we were able to move that to a part of their remit and automate as much as possible so that we're building quality in. And there's a great quote by W. Edwards Deming where he says that the quality, good or bad, is already in the product and the inspection is too late. And I think that's exactly the type of mindset that we wanted to promote in the team. Now, the benefit as well of doing this is we were able to significantly reduce time to production by automating this. And we use tools like OWASP Zap to automate security testing. So this is where it got us to in around 4 hours, just for a simple Hello World website or an API, but we were able to build something and get it into production in under 4 hours. So we started to look at where can we make further gains, and what we realized is that most of this remaining time was really in writing the code, as you can imagine. Because when you start writing the basics of an application or an API, there's a lot of common tasks that you have to do, starting from zero and getting an application into production. So things like logging, metrics, maybe if it's an API, things like health endpoints, there's a lot of common tasks there. And one of the team had the idea to, as we did with the infrastructure, perhaps use a generator to automate some of those foundational pieces. And that's exactly what we did. We started to look at the developer experience and how can we quickly on-ramp them to build applications. So this final step that we focused on to increase feedback loops was improving the developer experience and reducing cognitive load. And what I mean by cognitive load is reducing the amount of things or concerns that engineering teams had to think about that could be automated away. And then that frees their time up to focus on the business logic and the value added problem solving. And so this is a screenshot of our generator. We used a tool called Yeoman, and it just asks a series of questions. So things like, what do you want to create? And you have options here of a HTTP service, a website, etc. It asks you a bunch of questions. And then finally asks you things like, what language do you want to create it in? And today we support TypeScript, JavaScript, and .NET Core. And then at the end of this process, you had the foundations of an application that you could build. And again, this just reduced our time. We're now at the point where we could build an application, provision infrastructure, and get it in front of a customer, even a basic just hello world, but in under 60 minutes. And that was an incredible difference in terms of the world that we had seen when we previously joined. So what did we learn from this? So firstly, I might be talking about this in the sense that we went away and we did all this by ourselves. We definitely didn't. We connected with many teams to understand what their intent was as a part of these processes. So in understanding their intent, we could then work with them to work out how we actually automate this and ensure that we are remaining compliant and we have a high security posture. So a lot of collaboration in achieving this work. Secondly, we've realized that we're never done. Yes, we can build something and get it into production very quickly, but there's always a blocker. There's always something in the value stream that's going to slow us down that we'll need to focus on. So one example is last week, we tried to build a new service and realized we need a new database. And that's a problem point, a friction point that we haven't actually solved, our ability to spin up databases at speed. And that's the next thing that we're going to start to look at. But this is an ongoing journey. And then finally, owning the process. It'd be very easy for new processes to come in and for our 0 to 60 to kind of increase and get worse. So we need to make sure that moving forward, whatever we do, that we're conscious of this 0 to 60 vision to keep the value stream short and improve our ability to move at speed. And we're at the point now where we're able to move much quicker. We're kind of at the right here. We're able to move much quicker around this feedback loop. And the goal there, as I said earlier, is that we're no longer a part of this 64% of everything new is actually waste. And we hope that we're shifting more towards 64% of what we build is actually adding value, if not more. And again, this is all about helping to build digital products that add value for our customers and driving towards our company's mission to help people do more and feel better and live longer. Thank you.